Hello, everyone. I'm Patricia Rattray from William Pitt Sotheby's Real Estate in Stamford, Connecticut. I practice real estate in both New York and Connecticut, and I am experienced in both residential and commercial. And this short video is just to explain what realtors do. I get a lot of questions about how we spend our days, how we differ, how one realtor differs from another. And so I'm hoping to touch on some of those key areas to empower you to make the right choice when selecting a realtor. So, a little bit about me. I was educated at Brown University and NYU. I've been a full time realtor for over 20 years with cross property experience in rental, residential, and commercial segments. I also work with investors. I train them on investor performance, and I also refer in the luxury and global spaces as well. If you're buying internationally, we do have offices all over the world. I'm also a small business consultant, which allows me to provide real estate services for business owners as well as operations assistants when they're setting up and growing their businesses. So, realtors play primarily six key roles in the marketplace. And a lot of emphasis is given to the sales aspect of being a realtor. But I have to say, being a salesperson alone will make you a mediocre realtor at best because real estate requires extensive critical thinking skills, research analysis, and writing skills, as well as long term relationship building skills that often salespeople do not have, depending on their background and industry. So the first role that I want to talk about is being a contractor for hire. Then we'll go into how realtors educate their markets, their customers, how we are actually tour guides, analysts, transaction managers, and we're also a trusted research for you to start building social capital in the long term. So I'm going to start off with the idea that we are contractors for hire. And because we are contractors for hire, that relationship should require an interview process. No one should just be jumping into a car with a realtor without doing some screening as to what types of skills and education and experience that realtor can offer you. So just like any other working relationship, realtors should be interviewed. You should be aware of their experience, their availability to assist you in an upcoming transaction. They should demonstrate communication skills, financial acumen. You should ask for references, and they should have a solid understanding of the Realtor Code of Ethics. So, if you cover all of these things in your initial realtor interview, which is generally done at a real estate office, you should be in good shape to assess whether or not you're a good fit with that realtor. So just like when you're hiring any other contractor for hire, it's important to understand that realtors are actually running a small business. All realtors are self-employed. So even though I sit in an office with my broker, all the agents in that office have their own businesses and are running it in their own particular way. That is important to understand because it means that we are not just salespeople, but we are operations people. We are dealing with the administrative sides of our businesses. And all of that needs to be highly organized for us to be effective as agents. Representation agreements set up that relationship between you and your realtor, and it is required by law in Connecticut that some agreement be signed to set up that working relationship. When you sign representation agreements, you indicate the city and town that you'll be looking in, and it would also indicate start dates and end dates for that agreement. Some of them indicate property types, and they all should really talk about commission in terms of how the realtor is getting paid, especially covering some of the recent changes where it's very clear in that initial agreement what the buyer side agent is getting paid and what the seller side agent is getting paid. Most representation agreements don't have a cancellation policy, but that is something you can request. And once you're comfortable with that agreement, you should sign a long-term agreement. But you can also sign a short-term agreement until you feel comfortable. So keep in mind that I have seen agreements for a week or a month or 3 months, just so the person can assess the quality of the agent. And then later on, they're comfortable signing a longer-term agreement. Realtors are also educators, right? They have to educate on the entire process of purchasing property, and that education is different depending on how much property you're buying. The education starts with a consultation about the process, and I always like to include in that consultation and education about what can go wrong with a deal. If you're buying a condo, there's a list of items that we can troubleshoot before they happen. If you're buying a house, it's the same. We also discuss clearly with our clients the importance of a pre-approval and the difference between a pre-approval and a pre-qualification letter. We educate about the market. We educate about agreements, such as the contract of sale. We also do a lot of education about touring a property, how to look at a property and understand what can be changed and what can't be changed. And we look at how we do our analysis and research. And the core of that analysis is looking at data in the MLS and pulling up reports on market trends in each town. Realtors also educate on how to best negotiate a deal. We talk about disclosures that every office has to make to clients. We educate team communication and how important it is that we keep everyone on the team on track so they are completing tasks on time so that your deal is not jeopardized. We talk about inspections and resale practices, the loan processing package. We give you advice on contracts and what is normal and standard for contracts and what might seem out of place. We help you understand commitments, whether they're conditional or unconditional. We talk about the value of the walkthrough and then the closing process. So, in some of these initial consultations, I will talk about to cover highlights of all of these things that I will educate you on. But this is a massive undertaking, and I tend to educate slowly, piece by piece, so that my clients aren't overwhelmed. When it comes to contracts to purchase a property, realtors highlight the key parts of binders, standard form contracts, and bar association contracts. And so let's first talk about binders. Those are non-binding intents to purchase a property. Okay. And in Connecticut, we have the binder form, and in Westchester, we have something called a memorandum. And those documents are really just expressing your intent to buy, but they are not legally binding. The standard form contract is used in some parts of Connecticut. That is more legally binding, but you do have a 5-day review period before it is binding. And it's really important to understand what you're signing with a standard form contract because it is more of a binding contract than a binder. And then the Connecticut Bar Association contract is the standard contract that often replaces the binders and the memos. That is a longer contract that usually can be edited to be in favor of the buyer. And that is really the only contract that can really be edited, and altered in a way where the buyer has the maximum protections. We also educate on the financial terms of deals, your loan options, your equity. How do you calculate your equity and forced savings in a home? What is your annual interest in a home per year? What is your potential appreciation? And then your potential tax savings, right? You can have state and local tax deductions, which are called SALT. I mean, you do have some tax benefits, right, when you buy a home where for a single person up to 250,000 of your profit, your capital gain is tax free. So I'm not going to get into the details on this presentation, but this just gives you an idea of how much education realtors have to do to make sure you know the consequences and benefits of everything that you're doing. We also talk about environmental considerations, and we're not experts in the environment, but we do give you resources. Where can you go to understand air quality, sound quality, to explore public spaces wherever you're looking to purchase a home? Are there health, medical considerations in the purchase? And what are your attitudes about schools? How do you find the best information to make informed decisions in those areas? That's what we do. So these are some of the websites that my clients look into as we go through the process, and all of these websites touch on some of the issues that we've just spoken about. And we also talk about technology, last but not least. That is an area where super important these days with all of the fraud and the risk going on in the technology world. So we use a secure document management system. We have very strong email protocols, and protocols when wiring funds. So we talk about what measures are in place to protect you in all those areas. So, having that educator mindset is what separates a good realtor from a mediocre realtor, because real estate is a life skill and it touches on every area of life. Finances, taxes, municipal management, maintenance, all these things impact that real estate purchase. So, when you start building that relationship with your realtor, make sure she has that learning mindset that makes her an educator or makes him an educator. Trust your intuition about the quality of information that they're giving you and be intentional about where you get your advice from. Okay. You should eventually trust the advice from your realtor. If you don't, you should run. But also during that initial working relationship, talk about where else you get your information, because there are some sketchy sources of information that are going to derail you in your real estate search. So talk about how experienced your family is in real estate purchasing, your friends, your mentors, your neighbors. Talk about all your sources of information just so you can make sure you prioritize which sources are going to be most compelling as you go through the process. So realtors are also tour guides. We teach people how to look at homes. Because I'm a natural introvert, I really, really observe all the details of homes, not just the home itself, but the environment that they're in, the city, towns, neighborhoods that they're sitting in. I focus on what can't be changed because that is going to have the most long-term impact on your investment. I try to encourage my clients to use all of the senses, right? One sense that is often overlooked is sound noise, sound pollution. We tend to look at 1 to 2 towns at a time because it's really important to kind of get used to the look and feel of a town and make that assessment before you're looking in too many other towns. I ask about anomalies. Anytime I see something different or strange in a town, we have to do a little bit of research to see what that is. And then I like to educate my clients on house styles and periods, because with each house style and period, there's different levels of construction. There's different types of construction, heating systems, rooftops. And so those things you will get comfortable assessing over time, not necessarily the quality, because you're not studying to be a roofer unless you are a roofer, but just understanding the long-term maintenance cost of maintaining different types of styles and roofs and heating systems. That should all be known up front. You should have an idea of what that's going to take. Realtors are also analysts, and I talked a little bit earlier about running reports on the MLS, where we look at year over year and month over month sales in different areas. And that lets you know if an area is really strong with a lot of inventory or rising prices, or if it's kind of weak, maybe it has less inventory and lower prices. So we look at the month over month shifts in pricing over time, and then the month over month inventory over time. And we kind of see where those trends are going. In Connecticut, most of that is going up, but we have seen a little bit of a cooling in terms of pricing just for certain segments of the price of properties right now. We look at specific property types. I'd like to look at how many of each property type comes up on the market in a year. If you're looking for a very rare property, you're going to have to be more competitive. And we look at the frequency that certain properties are on the market as well. In our analysis, we also look at days on market, how quickly our property is moving, how quickly our property is coming on, and the list to sell price ratio as well. Lately, that has been over 100% in very, very competitive markets. Okay. Realtors are also transaction managers. We have to check in on the team, and it's an extensive team that is involved to make sure that you complete your purchase or your sale. And we have to manage the risks and the deadlines involved in each step of the process. So we're going to point you in the right direction to get all your questions answered in the research process. But as we move down the line of getting the loan, we'll provide regular updates on that as well in terms of where do we stand at each phase. And that requires talking closely with the lawyers, the mortgage brokers, the appraisers, the insurance companies to make sure that you're on track. We identify any red flags, anomalies in the process that seem strange, and we discover what's going on. We manage conflict in the process because sometimes emotions are involved and we have to keep everyone cool and calm and focused on solutions. We optimize the opportunities of the sale. What is it about the sale that we can do now that makes it worth more, that has more value in the future? I mean, something as simple as doing your own repair versus having the seller do a repair, right? You might want to fix something in a way that's more optimal than a seller would, right? So how do we optimize your future value now? We think about that at every phase of the transaction, and we document and organize information so that you have it for future reference later. And that's really important because a lot is going on now. And once you're in your house for 3 or 6 months, you're going to need to find and reference all the information that we're getting together now. So realtors are also a trusted resource for the long term, right? And if you're using the right realtor, that realtor has extensive experience and connections in the industry and in her community. That realtor can provide insider knowledge, insider data that can help you for not just this transaction, but for years to come, right? That realtor is familiar with contractors, they're familiar with renovation projects. Sometimes realtors have access to better pricing because they've referred certain professionals over and over again, where they can negotiate better deals. They have experience with certain challenges like water issues. So again, I'm not transactional. I am someone that you can call at any time and say, hey, do you have somebody for X, Y, and Z, right? Or what is your thought on renovating this kitchen? And we get those calls all the time. So we become long-term partners for you, and every deal with you, we develop another piece of information or another story that will help every other client going forward. So beyond the transaction, we have social connections, business connections, education connections, religious connections, and we're part of a community network that you should always feel free to tap into way after you've completed your transaction. So that's the end of that section. And I do have more to come in terms of initiating your first purchase. And I hope you stay tuned for future videos. Conclusion, what are your questions about buying, selling, or investing? Just send me a note. What did you like about this video? What was most helpful? What are your questions about the real estate industry? Please send a note to patriciarattrayrealestate.com, or you can just scan that QR code. Thank you. Have a great one.